The dining room of Russo's Bistro buzzed with energy as Ella darted between tables, balancing trays with practiced ease. Known for her dedication and polite demeanor, Ella was a favorite among customers and her co-workers alike. Tonight, however, the usual rhythm of her work was interrupted by an air of tension. The VIP section, reserved for one of New York's wealthiest philanthropists, was packed with influential guests. Ella had been assigned to oversee their service, a responsibility she handled with her usual precision, until disaster struck. As the party wrapped up, the hostess, a tall woman with diamond-studded accessories, gasped dramatically. "My bracelet is gone," she exclaimed, clutching her wrist. Her statement rippled through the room, turning heads and silencing conversations. A murmur of concern spread among the staff. The manager, a burly man named Tony, arrived promptly. "What happened?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. The woman glared at Ella, who was cleaning the nearby table. "She was the only one close enough to take it," she accused. Ella's eyes widened in shock. "I didn't take anything," she protested. But the hostess was insistent, and before long, Tony demanded Ella's belongings be checked. Humiliated, Ella handed over her purse, watching helplessly as her dignity unraveled. To her relief, no bracelet was found, but the damage was done. "I can't risk the reputation of Russo's over this," Tony said, his tone final. "You're fired, Ella." Her face burned with shame as she left the restaurant, clutching her modest bag. Outside in the cold evening air, Ella's tears blurred her vision. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, worn velvet pouch. Inside was a simple, unique ring, her only link to a family she never knew. She had carried it since she was a child, a comforting talisman against life's hardships. Before she could pocket it again, a man's voice startled her. "Where did you get that ring?" Ella turned to see a tall, middle-aged man with silver-streaked hair and piercing blue eyes. His expression was one of shock and recognition. "It's mine," she said defensively. "No," the man replied, his voice trembling. "That ring belonged to my daughter, Clara. She disappeared 18 years ago." Ella stood frozen, clutching the ring. "There must be a mistake," she said, taking a step back. The man, who introduced himself as Victor Bennett, shook his head. "That ring was custom-made for Clara on her 5th birthday. There's no mistaking it. It's one of a kind." Victor's gaze softened as he took in Ella's wary expression. "Please," he said gently, "I just need to understand how you have it. Clara was my daughter, and she disappeared without a trace. This ring is the only lead I've had in nearly 2 decades. Ella hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "I don't know much about my past," she admitted. "I grew up in an orphanage. This ring was found with me when I was abandoned as a baby." Victor's expression shifted from hope to sorrow. "An orphanage," he murmured. "Look," Ella said, her voice tinged with frustration. "I've had a rough night, and this is a lot to process. How do I even know you're telling the truth?" Victor reached into his wallet and pulled out a photograph. In it, a young girl with curly dark hair and bright eyes beamed at the camera. On her finger was the same distinctive ring Ella now held. Ella stared at the photo, her defenses crumbling. "If this is true," she whispered, "then what does that mean for me?" Victor's voice was steady but filled with emotion. "It means there's a chance you might be Clara, but we need to be sure. A DNA test could confirm it." Ella's head spun. Could this stranger really be her father? Could she be the lost Clara Bennett? Torn between skepticism and the faintest glimmer of hope, she nodded. "Okay," she said, her voice barely audible. "Let's do the test." As Victor called his assistant to arrange for the test, Ella felt a mix of fear and curiosity. For years, she had longed to know where she came from, but the possibility of being Clara brought more questions than answers. The night ended with Victor giving Ella his contact information and promising to expedite the testing process. As she walked home, Ella couldn't shake the feeling that her life was on the cusp of a profound change, one she wasn't sure she was ready for. The days following Ella's meeting with Victor were a whirlwind of uncertainty. She replayed their conversation repeatedly in her mind, scrutinizing every detail. Could she really be Clara Bennett, the missing daughter of one of New York's wealthiest men? Or was this all a cruel twist of fate? The ring, so familiar and comforting her entire life, now seemed like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. Ella sat in her small, cluttered apartment, her laptop open as she searched for information about Victor Bennett. The results were overwhelming. Articles chronicled his rise from a self-made real estate magnate to a philanthropist known for his generosity. Yet one thread stood out in every report: the mysterious disappearance of his only daughter, Clara. Victor's life had been overshadowed by the tragedy. Photographs of him and a young Clara appeared frequently, their bond evident in their shared smiles. But there was also a darker side. Ella found news clippings suggesting foul play, speculation about enemies in Victor's business circles, and rumors of his estranged wife's involvement. As Ella delved deeper, she found an old article detailing Victor's relentless search for Clara after she vanished. He had hired private investigators, offered rewards, and even combed through adoption records. But as the years passed, hope had dimmed, and the story faded from the headlines. Meanwhile, Victor was conducting his own investigation. He sat in his study, surrounded by boxes of documents and photographs. The ring was undeniably Clara's, but how had it ended up with Ella? He began tracing records from the orphanage she had mentioned, piecing together a timeline. Old adoption papers, reports of abandoned children, and handwritten notes painted a picture that was simultaneously hopeful and heartbreaking. Victor's assistant, Daniel, entered the room. "I've contacted the lab," Daniel said. "They're expediting the DNA test. Results should be ready within a few days." "Thank you," Victor replied, his voice heavy with emotion. He picked up a photo of Clara, her bright eyes mirroring his own. "If Ella is truly my daughter, then someone has been hiding her from me for years, and I need to know why." Ella couldn't help but feel the weight of Victor's search. She tried to push the thoughts away, burying herself in routine, but her mind always drifted back to the possibility of having a family, a father. She had spent her entire life longing for answers, and now, they seemed so close yet so terrifying. When Victor called to tell her the DNA test results were imminent, Ella's heart raced. "This could change everything," he said. Ella nodded, though he couldn't see her. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," she whispered. The morning of the results arrived, bringing with it a mix of anticipation and dread. Ella met Victor at a private medical lab in Manhattan. The sterile white walls and faint hum of machinery only heightened her anxiety. Victor offered her a reassuring smile. "No matter what happens, Ella, I'm grateful to have met you." She nodded, clutching the edges of her jacket. Moments later, a lab technician entered with a sealed envelope. The room seemed to shrink as the technician handed it to Victor. Victor's hands trembled slightly as he opened the envelope. His eyes scanned the paper, and when he looked up, they were filled with tears. "It's a match," he said, his voice breaking. "You're my daughter." Ella's breath caught in her throat. She stared at him, the words sinking in. "I'm Clara," she whispered. Victor nodded, his face a mixture of joy and sorrow. "Yes, you're Clara. My Clara." Tears streamed down Ella's face, but they weren't just tears of joy. They carried years of longing, confusion, and loss. Victor reached out, and for the first time, Ella allowed herself to embrace him. The ride home was silent as Ella processed the news. She wasn't just Ella anymore. She was Clara Bennett, heir to a fortune and the missing piece of a family she never knew. But the revelation brought as much pain as it did hope. Victor, too, was deep in thought. Reuniting with Clara was a dream come true, but it came with unanswered questions. Who had taken her? Why had she been left in an orphanage? And what role, if any, had his ex-wife Veronica played? Later that evening, Victor invited Ella to his home. The sprawling Bennett estate was a stark contrast to Ella's tiny apartment. Portraits of Clara adorned the walls, reminders of a life she couldn't remember. "This was your room," Victor said, guiding her to a space filled with dusty furniture and toys frozen in time. Ella ran her fingers over the faded pink wallpaper, feeling a strange sense of familiarity. "I don't know how to be Clara," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. Victor placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to be anyone but yourself. We'll take this one step at a time. What matters is that we're together again." As Ella looked around, a bittersweet sense of belonging began to take root. Yet, beneath the surface, she couldn't shake the feeling that the past still held secrets waiting to be uncovered. The days following the DNA confirmation were a whirlwind for Ella. No, Clara. Adjusting to her new identity was like stepping into a stranger's life. Victor was determined to bridge the years of separation and introduce Clara to the world she was meant to inherit. Victor invited her to stay at the Bennett estate. Although hesitant, Clara agreed, recognizing the need to understand this life that had been stolen from her. The estate was a masterpiece of luxury, from its marble floors to the expansive gardens that stretched as far as the eye could see. Yet Clara found it overwhelming. "You don't have to rush into anything," Victor reassured her over breakfast one morning. "This is your home now, but it'll take time to feel that way." Despite Victor's efforts to ease her transition, Clara struggled to reconcile her past and present. She spent hours wandering the estate, exploring rooms filled with memories she couldn't recall. Her bedroom remained untouched, a time capsule of her childhood. She traced her fingers over old storybooks, stuffed animals, and a small ballerina music box that played a hauntingly familiar tune. Victor often joined her, sharing stories about Clara's early years. "You loved this music box," he said one evening as they sat in her room. "You used to dance to it for hours, insisting you'd be a ballerina someday." Clara smiled faintly, though the memories remained elusive. "It's strange," she admitted. "Some things feel familiar, but it's like trying to grasp smoke. It slips away the moment I reach for it." Victor nodded solemnly. "Memories might come back, or they might not. What matters is building new ones." As Clara adjusted to her new life, Victor's thoughts turned to the past. He couldn't ignore the lingering questions about Clara's disappearance. His estranged ex-wife, Veronica, had always been cold and calculating. Their marriage had crumbled under the weight of greed and mistrust, and Victor had long suspected she harbored secrets about Clara's fate. One afternoon, Victor shared his suspicions with Clara. "I don't want to burden you," he began carefully, "but I believe your disappearance wasn't an accident. Someone took you from us." Clara's eyes widened. "You think it was Veronica?" Victor hesitated before nodding. "I can't prove it yet, but her behavior before and after you vanished raised too many questions. I need to know the truth." Clara felt a surge of anger and determination. "Then let's find out," she said firmly. Victor wasted no time. He hired a private investigator and reopened old leads. The investigator began by reviewing financial records, personal correspondences, and witness testimonies from the time of Clara's disappearance. Slowly, a pattern emerged, pointing directly at Veronica. Meanwhile, Clara started delving into the estate's archives, determined to play an active role in uncovering the truth. She unearthed journals and letters that hinted at Veronica's animosity toward Victor and her obsession with controlling the family's wealth. One evening, as Clara sifted through an old chest in the attic, she discovered a letter written in Veronica's handwriting. The letter was addressed to a man named Jackson Carter, urging him to handle the situation discreetly. Clara's heart pounded as she brought the letter to Victor. "This could be the connection we need," Victor said, gripping the letter tightly. The private investigator traced Jackson Carter to a shady business deal Veronica had orchestrated years ago. Interviews with former employees revealed Jackson's reputation as a fixer, someone who handled dirty work for powerful people. One witness, a former housekeeper, recalled seeing Veronica and Jackson arguing shortly after Clara's disappearance. "He was angry," the housekeeper recalled. "He said things had gone too far, and he wasn't going to take the fall if anyone found out." The pieces began to fall into place. Veronica had orchestrated Clara's abduction to secure her hold over the Bennett fortune, but something had gone wrong. Clara had ended up in an orphanage, slipping through Veronica's grasp. Clara felt a storm of emotions: anger, betrayal, and a deep sense of loss. "She took everything from me," she said, her voice trembling. "My childhood, my family, my identity." Victor placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll make this right," he vowed. "She'll face justice for what she's done." As Victor and Clara prepared to confront Veronica, the weight of the past bore down on them. The truth was within reach, but it came with a cost. Clara realized that uncovering the truth wouldn't erase the pain, but it was a step toward reclaiming her stolen life. In the shadows of the estate, the music box in Clara's room played softly, its melody a reminder that the past could not be changed, but the future was hers to shape. Victor wasted no time arranging a meeting with Veronica. Despite the years since their bitter divorce, she still carried herself with the same icy confidence that once made her both alluring and dangerous. Clara insisted on attending the confrontation, determined to face the woman who had stolen her life. The setting was neutral territory, a high-end cafe in Manhattan. Veronica arrived fashionably late, her perfectly tailored outfit and diamond-studded accessories a testament to the wealth she had fought to maintain. Her sharp eyes swept over Victor and lingered briefly on Clara, her expression unreadable. "This must be your guest," Veronica said smoothly, taking a seat across from them. "I assume there's a reason for this reunion beyond catching up?" Victor wasted no time. "We know what you did, Veronica. Clara's disappearance wasn't an accident. It was your doing." Veronica's lips curled into a faint smile. "You've always had a flair for dramatics, Victor. But if you're accusing me of something, I'd suggest you bring proof." Clara leaned forward, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "I found your letter to Jackson Carter. You hired him to take me. You wanted control over the Bennett fortune, and I was in your way." For a moment, Veronica's composed exterior faltered. Her eyes narrowed, and she shifted in her seat. "You don't know what you're talking about," she snapped. Victor placed the letter on the table, along with photographs and statements from witnesses. "We have enough evidence to expose you," he said. "It's over, Veronica." Veronica's mask of control shattered. Her voice rose, filled with venom. "You think this proves anything?" "Yes, I wanted her gone. You were always obsessed with Clara, and I was left with nothing. But Jackson was supposed to take her somewhere safe. Not this." Clara's stomach churned at Veronica's twisted justification. "You ruined my life," she exclaimed. "I grew up with nothing because of you. You stole my family, my childhood, everything." Veronica sneered. "Don't play the victim, girl. If you'd stayed out of sight, none of this would be happening." Victor rose, his voice commanding. "Enough. You've hurt my family for the last time. The authorities will handle the rest." Realizing she was cornered, Veronica's bravado crumbled. "You can't prove all of this in court," she hissed. But the panic in her eyes betrayed her. Victor's response was cold and final. "We'll see." The confrontation with Veronica only fueled Victor and Clara's determination. They knew the case against her needed to be airtight. Victor enlisted the help of Detective Harris, a seasoned investigator who had once worked on Clara's missing person case. Harris quickly reviewed the evidence they had gathered and began building a comprehensive case. The letter to Jackson Carter, the financial records, and testimonies from former employees formed a compelling narrative. But Harris wanted more, something irrefutable that would ensure Veronica couldn't escape justice. Clara threw herself into the investigation, scouring the Bennett estate for additional clues. Late one night, while combing through old storage boxes, she uncovered a set of ledgers that detailed suspicious payments made from Veronica's personal accounts around the time of her disappearance. The amounts matched the payments Jackson Carter had received. Victor, too, reached out to people who had been close to the family during Clara's childhood. One lead came from an unexpected source, a former nanny who had worked in the Bennett household. She revealed that Veronica had been unusually secretive in the weeks leading up to Clara's disappearance, often taking mysterious phone calls behind closed doors. "The last thing I remember," the nanny recalled in a recorded statement, "was seeing Veronica arguing with a man I didn't recognize. She seemed desperate." Meanwhile, Detective Harris tracked down Jackson Carter. After years of hiding, Carter was a shadow of his former self, living in a rundown apartment. Confronted with the evidence and the threat of legal action, Carter reluctantly agreed to cooperate. "I didn't know she'd leave the kid in an orphanage," Carter admitted during his deposition. "I thought I was just relocating her, keeping her out of the way. But when I found out what happened, it was too late. Veronica paid me to disappear." Carter's testimony was the final nail in Veronica's coffin. He provided detailed accounts of her scheme, including their meetings, the money exchanged, and her explicit instructions to remove Clara from Victor's life permanently. As the case against Veronica solidified, Victor felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. The truth was finally coming to light, but it couldn't undo the years of pain Clara had endured. Clara, however, found strength in the fight. For the first time, she felt like she had control over her own story. The weight of her stolen past was heavy, but the prospect of justice gave her hope. "We're almost there," she told Victor one evening. "This isn't just about me. It's about making sure she can't hurt anyone else." Victor nodded, pride shining in his eyes. "You've become so much stronger than I ever could have imagined." With the evidence compiled and witnesses ready, the stage was set for Veronica's downfall. All that remained was to see justice served. The day of Veronica's arrest was a spectacle that sent shockwaves through high society. Once a paragon of wealth and influence, she was escorted out of her luxurious penthouse in handcuffs, her sharp designer suit and flawless makeup doing little to mask the fear in her eyes. Cameras flashed as reporters shouted questions, the news spreading like wildfire. Veronica Bennett accused in decades-old kidnapping scandal. Victor and Clara watched the scene unfold on a live news broadcast from the Bennett estate. For Clara, it was a bittersweet moment. While justice was being served, it couldn't erase the years she had lost or the struggles she had endured. The trial began weeks later, and it was nothing short of a media frenzy. The courtroom was packed with reporters, lawyers, and spectators eager to witness the dramatic fall of one of society's elite. Veronica, now stripped of her glamorous facade, sat stiffly in the defendant's chair, her once confident demeanor replaced with unease. The prosecution's case was meticulous. Detective Harris presented the evidence with precision, from the financial records detailing Veronica's payments to Jackson Carter to the letter explicitly instructing him to handle the situation. The testimonies from witnesses, including Carter himself, painted a chilling picture of Veronica's calculated cruelty. Clara took the stand, her voice steady but filled with emotion. She recounted her life in the orphanage, the years of hardship, and the shock of discovering her true identity. "She didn't just take me from my family," Clara said, her gaze locking with Veronica's. "She took my sense of self, my childhood, and the love I should have known. And she did it all for greed." Victor's testimony was equally powerful. He spoke of the years of anguish, the relentless search for his daughter, and the betrayal of the woman he had once trusted. His voice cracked as he described the joy of finally finding Clara, only to learn the truth of Veronica's betrayal. Veronica's defense was weak, her lawyers struggling to discredit the overwhelming evidence. They attempted to paint her actions as misguided rather than malicious, but the jury wasn't convinced. Her cold demeanor and lack of remorse only solidified her guilt in their eyes. The verdict came swiftly. Veronica Bennett was found guilty of kidnapping, conspiracy, and fraud. As the judge sentenced her to decades in prison, Veronica's composure crumbled. She lashed out, screaming accusations at Victor and Clara, but her words fell on deaf ears. Justice had been served. For Clara, seeing Veronica led away in handcuffs brought a sense of closure. It didn't erase the past, but it gave her the chance to move forward. With Veronica behind bars, the storm that had engulfed Clara and Victor's lives began to settle. For the first time, they could focus on rebuilding what had been lost. Clara decided to officially change her name back to Clara Bennett, embracing the identity that had been stolen from her. Victor poured his energy into helping Clara adjust to her new life. He guided her through the intricacies of the Bennett family business, ensuring she had the tools to succeed in her rightful place. Clara, ever the determined spirit, took on the challenge with grace. Her years of independence had made her resilient, and she quickly proved herself capable of navigating the complexities of her new world. At the same time, Clara worked to reconcile with her past. She visited the orphanage where she had grown up, donating generously to improve the facilities and support the children who, like her, had faced uncertain beginnings. One afternoon, Clara stood in the orphanage's courtyard, watching children play. She smiled as a little girl ran up to her, tugging on her sleeve. "Are you a princess?" the girl asked, her eyes wide with wonder. Clara knelt down, meeting the child's gaze. "Not a princess," she said gently. but I know what it's like to dream of a better life. And I promise you, anything is possible. Meanwhile, Victor took steps to mend his fractured family. His youngest son, Ethan, who had grown distant during the years of turmoil, began to reconnect with him and Clara. The three of them spent more time together, sharing meals, stories, and laughter. Slowly but surely, they started to feel like a family again. One evening, as the sun set over the estate, Clara and Victor sat on the terrace, enjoying the peaceful view. "It still feels surreal," Clara admitted. "I spent so long not knowing who I was, and now I have all of this." Victor smiled, his eyes filled with pride. "You've earned every bit of it. And no matter what, you'll always have a place here, with me, with this family." Clara nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of belonging. The shadows of her past no longer defined her. They had shaped her into someone stronger, someone ready to embrace the future. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, Clara whispered, "Thank you, Dad." Victor's breath hitched at the word he had waited so long to hear. "Always," he said softly. Together, they looked toward the horizon, their hearts full of hope. The scars of the past would never completely fade, but they were no longer wounds. They were reminders of resilience, love, and the power of finding one's way back home. The journey to justice and healing had come to an end, ushering in a new chapter in Clara Bennett's life. Once stripped of everything, her family, her identity, her childhood, she now stood tall in the light of truth. Veronica paid the price for her sins, not only with the years she would spend behind bars, but also with the isolation and regret she could never escape. Yet Clara's story was about more than punishment. It was a testament to the power of courage, love, and forgiveness. Victor Bennett, the father who had endured 2 decades of heartbreak, could now look at his daughter with pride. In finding Clara, he had rediscovered a part of himself, a part he had thought lost forever. Clara, who had once been an orphan with no name, had grown into a strong and compassionate woman. Not only did she reconcile with her past, but she also used her newfound wealth and influence to help those less fortunate. Her love and empathy became a guiding light, transforming her scars into hope for others. Life at the Bennett estate was now filled with laughter, warm family dinners, and plans for the future. Clara, Victor, and Ethan, once separated by tragedy, were finally a family in every sense of the word. One morning, as the sun rose over the sprawling estate, Clara stood by the grand window, gazing at the gardens below. A sense of peace washed over her. Life isn't always easy, she thought, but it always offers us a chance to start over if we're brave enough to take it. With a steady step, Clara walked into the world, ready to embrace whatever the future held. She knew she was no longer alone. Family, love, and truth were her constant companions, like a light that could never be extinguished. The story ends here, but Clara Bennett's journey had only just begun. It was a journey free from the weight of the past, filled instead with hope, healing, and dreams waiting to be realized. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We want to extend our heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you who took the time to listen to Clara Bennett's story. Your support and attention mean the world to us. We hope you found inspiration, emotion, and healing in this tale of resilience, justice, and love. If you enjoyed the story and would like to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your feedback and support help us continue to bring you more captivating stories that touch hearts and spark imaginations. Make sure to hit the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. We're so grateful to have you as part of our community, and we can't wait to share more incredible stories with you. Thank you again for your time and for being part of this journey. Until next time,